moving on to the next part in our series, Module 3. It's Module 3, weather. Okay, we're going to learn all the different vocabulary that you need to learn for your everyday working life and also for your ICAO English test, wherever you are in the world. You're also going to learn about procedures when you're flying in different types of weather conditions. You're going to learn about everything regarding meteorology and weather. Good luck, and let's go.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Today, we're going to be looking at a critical component for the ICAO exams and communication, understanding the weather. It's particularly important to us as pilots because, for example, as you see in the picture here, in one part of the day, the weather can be, as you see on the right, snowing. The other part of the day, we've got lightning, thunderstorms. So changing conditions happen at the last time, at the last minute. So we need to be able to understand these conditions. So when we're listening to a communication from ATC, we can use aeronautical decision-making to make the correct decision. Weather is of crucial importance to pilots both in flight planning and in the safe operation of a flight, and it affects all phases of the flight. Modern aircraft are undoubtedly much better equipped to deal with the different meteorological conditions than the machines which took to the air in the early days of powered flight. Weather reports also today are much more reliable. Nonetheless, pilots of today's international jet airliners need to deal from time to time with several potential dangers presented by weather. And weather in itself is not, and aviation in itself is not inherently dangerous, but to an even greater degree than the ocean, the sea, aviation is terribly unforgiving of any carelessness, incapacity, or neglect. So when we're understanding what's happening with the weather, we need to be able to take into account changing conditions and react to them accordingly. Sometimes what we're asked in an ICAO exam is a general question. This is the type of general question that we can get. What are some of the possible effects of weather? How would you answer this? Normally, the best way to answer this is to use the question in the answer. For example, some of the possible effects of weather is weather can affect my ability to land and take off. It can give me poor horizontal and vertical visibility. Also, weather can affect my choice of runways. It can give me challenging approaches and hard touchdowns, crosswinds, gusting, and wind shear. Also, aquaplaning and increased landing distances when wet, icy or snow-covered runways. Today, we'll also look at contaminated runways. Damage to windshield, radome, leading edges, and this could be caused, for example, by hailstorms. Structural damage and the effect on electrical opponents, such as caused by a lightning strike. Damage to the engines, engine stall. This is environmental in the sense that volcanic ash, if we fly into volcanic ash, we're going to have a problem. And obviously, weather can give us longer flight times with headwinds and shorter flight times with tailwinds. There is a huge difference between flying in a small aircraft like a Cessna 172, a PA-28, and flying commercially. Most of the time, flight academies, we're training in visual flight rules, whereas in the commercial airline world, we're flying in IMC IFR conditions. What we do need to note, though, that every day is different. Every day is a challenge, and you, as the pilot in command, are responsible for the safety of the flight. So you need to be proactive and ahead of the aircraft at all times. Very important to us is understanding what we're going to be flying into. So obtaining a good weather briefing is in the interest of safety. And don't forget, our primary responsibility is the safety of the flight, which includes our crew and passengers. And to do that, we need to ensure that we have all the needed information and that it is obtained normally before we actually depart, so we know what we're doing and what we're flying into. So when requesting a briefing, pilots should identify themselves and provide as much information regarding the proposed flight as possible. The information received will depend on the type of briefing requested. And the following information we believe will be helpful to you. Obviously, your type of flight. Are you on visual flight rules or are you in instrument conditions? The aircraft number, pilot's name, the aircraft type, the departure point, the route of the flight, the destination, the flight altitudes, the estimated time of departure, and the estimated time en route or estimated time of arrival. Obviously, we're taking into account all the weather conditions on the synoptic charts as we read them, and also further information that's provided to us by dispatch. A standard briefing should include adverse conditions, good, bad weather. VFR, visual flight rule flight, is not recommended when the conditions say, no, it's not good to fly in that type of conditions. The weather synopsis, the positions and movements of the lows, highs, fronts, we need to be able to understand what's actually happening with the weather. And also, the most important word here, the current weather. What is the weather now? What's the weather going to be like in the future? When we say future, we use the word forecast, and a forecast will give us en route and destination conditions. Also, winds, temperatures aloft, any alternate routes if we need to plan any, and we're taking also into consideration notices to airmen, the NOTAMs, and also possibly any ATC delays. Also, we have to deal when we're en route. If we need more information, we can ask for a pilot report, a PIREP. So when we're listening to a PIREP, what information are we listening to, and what information, for example, in an ICAO exam, would we need to read back?
Incoming flight reporting a bumpy ride.
So basically here, ATC is reporting that incoming flights are reporting a bumpy ride. Notice the word bumpy.
Incoming flight reporting a bumpy ride.
So in ICAO, we're not just using the word turbulence, we will have other words for turbulence. And as you see on this page here, typical words that are used additional to turbulence can be, we are having a bumpy ride, we are having a rough ride. The opposite is we're getting a good ride, a calm ride. Also, if it's turbulent, we can also use the word choppy and amplify that by saying it's very choppy up here, or there is a light chop. The opposite being, again, we are having a smooth ride. And also we can use words like the winds blew us off course. Understanding what I just said, now listen to it.
The winds blew us off course.
Okay, what did the pilot say?
The winds blew us off course.
Understanding the words that the winds blew, blown. So basically what we're talking about here is the irregular use of blow, blew, and blown, and how it actually sounds.
The winds blew us off course.
Of course being off track. No pilot should take a risk, but temptations do exist, as landing at another airport will be inconvenient for the passengers and crew maybe, as well as costly for the airline. So we always have to remember on the flight deck, what is our number one responsibility? Our number one responsibility is the safety of the flight, including the crew and the passengers. Airline procedures do exist to prevent us making maybe the wrong decisions, and passenger safety certainly comes before passenger inconvenience in all cases. What do I mean by that? For example, if I have to divert to another airport and the passengers, it might be the last flight of the day, and instead of going to the airport destination, maybe the passengers aren't going to be happy. Maybe you're not going to be happy because you're not going back to your origin airport, you're not going back to your home, you're not going back to your bed. So these are all types of pressure that we take into account. But the number one thing in making the correct decision, and what this is about, is aeronautical decision making, is to determine the best course of action in response to what we understand, what's happening, what ATC communicates to us. Take, for example, this Virgin aircraft flying into London Heathrow. It's an example of aeronautical decision-making. So we need to understand the communication for the last-minute changing conditions from ATC, especially when we're on a 10-mile final.
Good morning, Virgin 10 Kilo with you.
Virgin 10 Kilo, hello. Continue approach runway 27 left, surface wind 210 degrees at 17, gusting 31 knots. And Virgin 10 Kilo, there are two wind shear reports for you. The first is between 1,000 feet and 700 feet, plus 15 knots has been reported, and also at 200 feet, a loss of 15 knots has been reported.
So what we're hearing from the London controller here is that we got wind shear at two different levels. You're on approach, and basically the controller is saying, what do you want to do?
Reported.
Virgin 10 Kilo is wind shear, go around. Good morning.
All well and good, but we need to understand, especially when we're flying into international airports such as London Heathrow, that we're dealing with a completely different set of events that might be different to your home country. The main thing we need to understand in London Heathrow, everything is compacted, and there's normally about a 30-second separation between aircraft. So in making a decision, we've got to be snappy. We cannot be saying to the controller, say again. And to give you an idea of what it's like flying into London, let's take a look at this, which determines here, it shows you the four holes, which in London, outside of Heathrow, are called stacks.
30 miles out of Heathrow, inbounds are routed into four corkscrew holding patterns called stacks. Planes enter a stack around 15,000 feet. After a series of descending spirals, they exit at 7,000 feet. As one leaves, the rest descend one level, and a new plane enters the stack. 10 miles out, planes from all four stacks are vectored into a single line for landing. Inbounds glide past outbounds 1,000 feet apart in a synchronized dance.
So what we learn from this is look at the separation between the aircraft. It's very close. Therefore, if you're not understanding what the controller's doing and have to go say again, the controller's not necessarily going to be very happy with you because you're going to break his sequence. So we really need to be concise and alert and understand what the controller's saying.
Choreographed down to the second.
So let's take a look. You have to listen to a communication. You need to understand the communication. So in this communication, you're going to hear a problem. When you're listening to the audio, what you need to try and do, what you need to try and identify, always try and think this way when you're online in a communication, a radio communication with a controller. First thing is, where is the problem? And then what is the problem?
3.
There has been a heavy storm, and there are patches of standing water towards the center section of runway 28 left.
So what the controller is saying here is?
3.
There has been a heavy storm, and there are patches of standing water towards the center section of runway 28 left.
So the controller is basically telling me that there's a lot of water in the center section of 28 left. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? What are my intentions? First of all, if he's telling me there are patches of standing water towards the center section of 28 left, the first thing that comes into my mind as an airline pilot is, what is my braking action going to be? Will I have sufficient runway to stop in time? If not, that can be a possible runway incursion. So a lot of water on the runway can be flooded, and that can cause, for example, a skid off or a slide off runway excursion. So this is where we need to take care. We need to make the right decision. We know also that he's telling me that the center section of 28 left is a problem. So in my mind, can I take 28 right? Do I need to go to the alternate? Do I have sufficient fuel, etc.? So again, in listening to information, it's good that we need to know, what do I need to know? Where and what is the problem? And then what are my intentions?
3.
Incoming flights have been reporting sudden changes in wind speed and direction and downdrafts over the last mile to touchdown.
So how does this affect me? I've just heard that there's a problem. Where is the problem?
3.
Incoming flights have been reporting sudden changes in wind speed and direction and downdrafts over the last mile to touchdown.
Okay, I'm on approach. The problem is in the last mile to touchdown. Okay, what is the problem? Basically, I've got wind problems, possible wind shear. I've got downdrafts, change in direction, and it's sudden. And this is a pilot report. It's incoming. Therefore, what do I need to do? What do I want to do? I'm probably going to make a go around in these conditions, because if I fly into these conditions, I could be putting my aircraft, my crew, and passengers at risk. Also, when we're understanding vocabulary and weather, we need to understand some basics. And some of those basics, those words, change in different parts of the world. This is an ICAO exam, so we need to know all the vocabulary. For example,
4. There is solid cloud from 1,000 to 6,000 feet.
okay, so we got a problem with cloud 1 to 6,000, but I didn't get that word. Say again.
4. There is solid cloud from 1,000 to 6,000 feet.
Solid, thick. Basically, I'm in IMC conditions. Okay.
4.
Winds from the northeast are causing the runway surface to be covered in snow in some places and some runway markings to be hidden.
So in understanding that communication, what's the problem? I heard there's a problem with the runway markings. That means I might not be able to taxi or even land on the runway because, hey, some of those markings are covered. So what are we talking about here?
4.
Winds from the northeast are causing the runway surface to be covered in snow in some places and some runway markings to be hidden.
So I can't see exactly where the edge of the runway is, or maybe the center line. That's possibly dangerous for me. So maybe I can land or maybe not. I'm going to ask for a further report. But if I am successful in landing, maybe I'm going to need a follow me car and possibly a tug pay mover to tow me from position. So these are all considerations I need to make on the actual approach. And before the approach, normally when we're picking up the ATIS, because in the ATIS we're calculating the safe stopping distance for the remaining length of runway based on the changing weather. So yeah, there is some phraseology out there that we need to understand. Obviously, we need to use standard phraseology accurately and appropriately, even when switching between phraseology and plain language. Pronunciation of phraseology has to conform to ICAO recommended pronunciations when available, or otherwise to a natural model of pronunciation, which, we understand. And also we need to be accurate. Accurate use of phraseology implies that terminology, the syntax, and sentence frames conform to prescribed models whenever these are required by the situation or intended message. So let's look at some basic phraseology here. Obviously, to read is one thing, to hear is another. And I put this up on the screen because maybe you're not accustomed to hearing words. Well, certainly I understand 0, but when I start talking fast and say visibility 1/16, visibility 1/8, visibility less than 1/4, visibility 3/4, visibility 1.5, visibility 8, visibility 2.5. Numbers are important for clarity and definition. When we're talking, for example, about RVR, we're talking about runway visual range. So for example, I could say runway 18 RVR variable from 2,000 to 3,000, or runway 18 visual range variable from 2,000 to 3,000. So we need to understand what we're talking about. Then we have what we call the weather descriptors, and that's where we're combining intensity with a descriptor and the weather phenomenon. So instead of just talking about snow, I'm talking about blowing snow. Instead of talking about rain, I'm talking about light freezing rain. Instead of talking about drizzle, lovizna, I'm talking about freezing drizzle. Instead of fog, shallow fog. And where is the problem? It's in the vicinity close to the airport. So these are important words for us.